Mendy, what is your role in salmon habitat management at the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center in Belfair, Washington, and how long have you worked in the field?
So I'm the executive director here at the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group at the Salmon Center, and so my role really is to kind of oversee and come up with projects for the project management staff. So we have 4 project managers here, and typically I will identify habitat restoration projects and then assign them to different staff members. Yeah, so actually there's a lot of really great things happening in Kitsap County. For one, we have the Intensively Monitored Watershed Program, which is actually taking place in Seabeck Creek, Stavis Creek, Big Beef Creek, and then also in Little Anderson Creek. So that's actually a program where we're actually monitoring all of the fish that are going in and out of each of those streams to determine whether or not our habitat restoration efforts are having a positive impact on wild fish. So that's one really great thing that's happening. But we also have you may have heard that Hood Canal Summer Chum has really been making a great comeback, and that's largely related to a lot of the habitat restoration that our group and then a lot of our partnering groups have done for habitat restoration.
Great. And then how is the Salmon Center specifically working to reestablish wild salmon populations here?
Yeah, so gosh, we have lots of project partners and then our own staff who are working on Hood Canal Summer Chum for specifically. We have, each year about $2 million worth of habitat restoration projects, as well as some conservation efforts towards Hood Canal Summer Chum and the reintroduction of those species throughout the canal. So we have, runs of Hood Canal Summer Chum where we will take brood stock, so we'll collect eggs and milt from the adult fish, and then fertilize those eggs and then release them into another stream to rebuild a population in that other stream. So we've done that successfully mostly in Mason County, but there have been other efforts on Big Beef Creek and other parts of the Hood Canal as well.
Absolutely. And then how can community members become involved at the Salmon Center?
Oh yeah, so we actually have 450 active volunteers who work on different projects with us. We have an adult salmon trap in the Union River here in Mason County. But we also have juvenile outmigration traps located all throughout the Hood Canal, where volunteers will come and help us check the trap and count the number of individual salmon in the trap and release them. And sometimes they actually get to collect DNA samples and other scale samples from the fish so that they can learn more about the biology of those fish.
Okay, Pat, what are you currently doing in stormwater education and outreach to advocate and teach about salmon populations? And how long have you been working in this field?
So I've been working in the field about 20 years, a little over 20 years. And some of what we've been doing recently, there's been several different restoration projects, and so I've been trying to come up with some ways to teach students about those restoration projects. I do a lot of things in classrooms. And so when we do field trips, not only do we have students that come along, but we also have the benefit of having their parents come, so the parents get some education about it as well. We also do, in my department as a whole, Public Works even as a whole, we do a lot of education about different projects that are happening and how those are benefiting not only people, but salmon and the habitat in the area. And then we have in our stormwater division, we do storm drain marking so that people understand things that go down storm drains. That water goes right out to streams where salmon live and right out into Puget Sound, so we have to be careful about what goes down there. I also do a salmon in the classroom program in conjunction with the Clear Creek Task Force. So students are raising salmon from eggs to fry in their classrooms, and then we have field trips that they come out and they learn about water quality and stream bugs and the habitat, and also release their salmon.
So how, as Washington residents, can we be involved in making sure our salmon populations and their habitats are sustainably managed and protected?
Well, I think individually, each person can do some things by themselves to help keep the water clean and to help improve habitat or maintain habitat. We're going to be focusing in another year or two on natural yard care, so that's one way that people can learn about how to keep their gardens the way they want to keep them, but also keep salmon in mind so that they're not interfering with water quality or impacting water quality. We also have a program called Clean Water Kitsap, where we have several agencies in the area that are working together in partnership to keep water clean and to improve habitat. So we have the Kitsap Conservation District, Kitsap Public Health, Kitsap County Public Works, the Kitsap PUD as well as WSU Extension that all work together to educate the public about different ways we can do things and still keep the water clean. So the Conservation District has a program where people can get cost share to build a rain garden or put in other kinds of things where they get stormwater to soak into the ground so it gets filtered and slowly seeps out to the water instead of flowing out as stormwater. Conservation District also has a program for backyard habitat improvement. So if people have streams in their backyard, then they can apply for a grant and possibly do some improvement for the habitat there. We have septic sense workshops. If somebody's on a septic system, they can attend a workshop and find out how to maintain that properly, both for them and for the environment. And then WSU Extension has stream steward programs where people can volunteer and learn a lot about the habitat and a lot about the environment, and then also volunteer to help improve those areas.
What was your experience in working with salmon restoration projects at Kitsap County Public Works, and how long did you work in the field?
So I've worked in the water quality field in Kitsap County for over 20 years, and I retired about 2 years ago. So it's been a nice time to reflect upon those 20 years and all the work that was done.
And then what are some of the ways Kitsap County restores salmon habitats through restoration projects?
So there's different aspects of restoration projects. I like to think of it as really a three-prong approach. So the first one is water quality, the actual chemistry of the water, the pollution levels in the water, the amount of silt in the water. And Kitsap County does a lot of work with tracking sources of pollution, removing those sources of pollution, whether it's from small businesses, big businesses, from the road surface itself, from the roads being dirty and grimy and oily. Kitsap County also, in terms of pollution sources, did a landmark study about 10 years ago showing a strong relationship between the cleanliness of commercial properties, places like malls and parking lots, the cleanliness of their stormwater systems. If those were clean throughout the year, the streams would be much, much cleaner. And so that study done locally here in Kitsap has been adopted throughout the Puget Sound, that cleanliness of stormwater systems is really important. The second leg of that triad is the structures, the structural part of the stream, and that has to do with blockages, culverts, fish being able to get to the waters upstream, to migrate, to rear, to live, to hide from predators. And for many years, Kitsap County has looked at and evaluated all the culverts throughout the county, and then they rate them, and then they've started replacing them according to priority, and they do it by watershed. So the watershed we're in now, Clear Creek watershed, they've replaced pretty much every culvert that was blocking or partially blocking. So it's structural, because salmon will live in any water that they can get to. They're very remarkable. So the third part of that is really the upland habitat. So I'm thinking about the in-stream habitat with the structures, but what's on the banks, the sides of the stream banks, is really almost as important as the stream itself. And that third leg, what Kitsap County does is they do a lot of plantings. They've done restoration projects where they remove, like this area, the Clear Creek Restoration Project, which is probably its largest restoration project. It's a $2 million project. And removed a lot of sediment that had flowed in from the upper watershed during development of homes and businesses. They also planted thousands and thousands of trees and shrubs, and eventually this will all grow up into a beautiful canopy for the side of the stream. So it's that triad that they really work on.
So you mentioned the Clear Creek Restoration Project that we're standing in was actually a $2 million project. How is this project funded?
That's a really great question. We're very, very fortunate in Washington State to have the support of our legislature. So it's funded locally through the stormwater utility fees that everybody pays into. Every property owner here who owns a home pays about $100 a year, and they get a lot of bang for that buck. It funds this whole Clean Water Kitsap program of multiple agencies working together. These agencies working together are much more powerful than one agency could be. So it's Kitsap Public Health District, Kitsap Public Works, the Kitsap Conservation District, and WSU Extension. And there are other partners also that could be considered really Clean Water Kitsap partners. And so it's funded through the stormwater utility fees, but also the state legislature funds, they put out there through the general legislature fund about $50 to $100 million a year for construction projects to restore habitat, to fix broken stormwater systems. And in construction, 50 to 100 million sounds like a lot of money, but an interchange can cost $4 million to do. And that covers maybe about 4 or 5 acres. So we get a lot of bang for our buck for that 50 to 100 million dollars that's awarded throughout the Puget Sound for stormwater restoration.
And then what management practices have worked well or have not worked well that you've seen in the past?
Well, management practices that have worked very well is to look at ways to almost recycle materials. I'm going to use one specific, and being flexible and opportunistic. I want to give you an example is many of these projects require large amounts of woody debris. So large trees that have the root wads on them. And they're expensive. If you went out and bought these, it would drive the cost of your project high. And the benefit of woody debris is huge in a restoration project. And the more wood you put in, the better outcome you're going to have for that project. So what Kitsap County identified early on was whenever they were doing another project and trees had to be removed, they would especially remove the tree with the root wad and cut it and store it in a certain way that it could be used later. So it was a great way to stretch the dollars and then reuse and recycle existing trees that had to be taken down for projects. And so they have a log yard of tons of trees, and they've been pulling those out for these different restoration projects.
So how do you think salmon habitat restoration projects will progress or change in the future?
Kitsap County is looking at assessing these and monitoring, is looking at the bugs, the macroinvertebrate populations, and asking the question, you can almost read the bugs. What kind of bugs are coming back? And you'll see the populations change over time, and you'll see them progress and become more advanced and complex. I think by having best available science in the future, we can go back and assess how best to do these projects and how most efficient and effective to do them. Because there's only limited amount of dollars, and so we have to spend them wisely.